Kirsten Lyons is joining us. She is the author of the soon to be released book, Crushed, which I have read, loved
You
it.
have.
I love
Thank
this
you.
book. I want to talk about trading a dream. As
Mhm.
I've progressed through my 30s, I've reevaluated, and the dreams that I had as a child, a teen, and and a woman in my 20s are much different than what I dream for as a woman approaching my mid 30s. And I want to talk about, trading one dream for another and how you get the courage to do that.
Hmm. Okay. Well, first off, I love that you said courage because I think it really does take a lot of courage to do the biggest thing, which is figure out where the dream came from. I think it's really important to be like, hey, why do I want this? What does it bring me? What am I trying to achieve with the dream? For me, I was an actress. I moved to LA when I was 21. I was fortunate enough to guest star and co star on TV shows, network and cable, and stuff like that. But for the most part, I was struggling. I was working 3 to 4 jobs, and I was trying to make ends meet and bouncing rent checks sometimes, and sometimes just eating cereal. And I had to like put into perspective after being in LA for more than a decade of like, what is this I want? Why do I want it? What am I trying for me? What am I trying to fill? And I had childhood wounds that I had to, which I talk about in the book. I talk about crushed in a funny way, but I had to go back and really realize like, why do I love, and I love performing. I love making people laugh. I love acting. I loved being on set. But I think a lot of it was also like, what am I trying to fix or heal through this acting that acting was never the town of Los Angeles and Hollywood was never going to be able to do. And yeah.
What's so crazy? And I know we're going a little bit long here, is I've had to evaluate myself, like, why do I love a stage
Mhm.
so much? And I think as I worked through therapy, I realized I love a stage. One, because I love it. But two, it's
Mhm.
a place where I have felt love in return. And I have tied
Mm.
like that's the love that I've known the greatest.
Mhm.
So it's like, "Oh, I have to have that or I'm unlovable." But now as I've realized that and I've started to love myself, I've
Yes.
realized like, "Oh, I don't need the stage in the capacity that I have craved for it."
100%. And I think also there's nothing wrong with loving to like tell a story or make people laugh or put on a show. There's
Mm.
nothing wrong with that. I think what happens is when we're seeking our ultimate validation and worth through it. And I think that is where you see so many of us in the entertainment industry and on the performance industry that have just kind of gotten really lost. And to be honest, it's not just us, it's everybody. We all seek validation through different means and kind of trying to figure out how we can best love ourselves and love other people through our dreams.
Prediction, am I a psychic? No. Do I feel like this book is going to go straight to the top of the charts? I do. Kirsten Lyons is joining us. Not only are you somebody I admire online, I'm proud to call you a
Mm.
friend. I've read the book Crushed. For those who maybe are just meeting you for the first time, what
Yes.
is this book all about?
Okay, first of all, this book came from a broken engagement. I was tying the bows on my wedding invitations as my ex fiance came in and was like, "Hey, I don't think I know what love is, and I don't know if I ever loved you." And then, like 45 minutes later, told me that he had cheated. And then a few months
First
later,
off,
when
can we just call him what he is? A little stinky turd. Like,
he's a poo poo head. No,
yeah.
and but I will say this. That's where the book starts, but the book is so much more than a broken engagement. The book
Mhm.
is so much more than um broken dreams. It's really, what do we do when our life doesn't look like what we hoped, wanted, dreamed it to be? I mean, the cover literally has a mash board, like the 90s recess game mash. Because how
Yes.
many of us when we were 12, 13, 25, 35 have mapped out our life and decided what's going to be great, what's going to be perfect, and then it doesn't happen. And we are sold this kind of like, whether it's an American dream or whatever it is, that if you build it, it will happen, right? If you dream it, it'll happen. You can do whatever. Oprah sold it to us in the 90s and the 2000s.
Mhm.
There are people that have gotten everything they ever wanted, but that is so few and far between. And most of us are why it feels, at least what I know to be true for people around me, especially young women, we're watching people get their dreams and it just feels like we're the only one.
It feels like there's an amplification too of this on social media because we take
Hmm.
it at its face value and we don't get to
Yes.
see the struggle behind the achievement.
Right.
But this book was it was, like, so well-rounded too because, like, you talk about your heartbreak, your failures, but then you also talk about the accomplishments that you find through
Mhm.
those things.
Yeah, and I really think the beauty of getting crushed as many times as I did, I mean, being a struggling actress, having a broken engagement, being a bullied kid, there's a lot of things in this. I mean, we lost our house at one point. We were renting because we brought my little sister, who eventually became our foster daughter, into the home, and the landlord didn't let us. I mean, there's so many crush moments in this book where I hope readers just know they're not alone. But also, I hope readers also know there are surprises waiting for you beyond the broken heart and the broken dreams. There are surprise waiting for you, and there I have come to realize they're better than anything I could ever have dreamed up for myself. But that doesn't mean I don't long for what I thought I wanted. Like, both can be true at the same time.
Mm.
The surprises aren't like, oh my gosh, and now I'm a national New York Times bestselling author. That's not what I mean. The surprises are usually small, and they're usually real, and they're usually genuine, and they're usually beautiful, and they're hopeful.
She is a relationship extraordinaire. We we're okay, so Kirsten Lyons, we were mutuals on TikTok, and I think we've become friends even though we've never met in person, and
We
you have written
100% are friends. We're friends.
yes, because 'cause I've definitely texted you or called you and be like, "What would you do in this situation?" And we've, like, never breathed the same air, but you wrote this book. I have read it. I'm one
Mhm.
of the few people who have because it's on pre-order, and it is like, for me, at the point of my life that I am in, where I have been crushed, it feels like 10,000 times, and through
Mhm.
that crushing, I feel like these little diamond moments happen. It's a brilliant book. Ironically enough, or not, it is called Crushed. It is about a relationship that kind of kicks off your life and kicks off these, like,
Yeah.
crushing moments. It's about how, like, you were engaged to this duty head. Well, you tell us the story because I wanna talk about healthy versus unhealthy relationships.
Basically, I was engaged to a guy, and while I was tying the bows on our wedding invitations 2 months before, he came in to tell me that he didn't know what love was, maybe he never did, oh, and maybe he never loved me. And then about 45 minutes later, come to find out that he had cheated, and a few months after that, he won $100,000 on a reality show. When I tell you, the hits just kept coming. But the book starts about that, but it's really so much more. It's so much about going back into childhood and teenage wounds and even early 20 wounds and being like, why did I let myself get in this situation? It doesn't let him off the hook for the atrocities that he like bestowed upon our relationship and upon me. It's more about, how did I get to this place of allowing someone to treat me like this?
And I know, like, the book starts out unhealthy. Obviously, you were
Right.
I don't wanna say desperate to receive love, but maybe you didn't know how to love yourself.
Kind of.
But, like, for me, like, I didn't know how to love myself, so how could I know
Mm,
what healthy love looks
yeah.
like? And your
Yeah.
book really journeys that evolution that you have. Now, obviously, you're in a very healthy relationship,
Mm.
marriage. What are the some big, like, contrasts, unhealthy versus healthy for you that you discovered along
I
the
would
way?
say a massive contrast is I just feel safe. I
Mm,
would say that I don't feel like I'm constantly walking on eggshells. And I showed up in my former relationship with my ex very much my authentic self. I talk about in the book, there was another relationship where I twisted myself up as a pretzel to get the guy to like me. And there were other boys that I did that. But really, in that relationship, I was my authentic self. So when he rejected me, it was all of me that he rejected, which
mhm.
was felt so paralyzing and so demoralizing. But I think for me, it looking at the relationship I'm in now, I can show up as my fully myself. He shows up fully as himself, and I just feel safe. We can communicate. I can be honest. He can be honest. There's no there's no concern that if I say something quote unquote wrong, that he will come after me emotionally. I just think there's just a safety there, and there's so much laughter. And it's, somebody said one time in one of my TikToks, like, it's just a healthy attachment. I just love him for who he is. He loves me for who I am. And we're just actively ourselves constantly.
Kirsten Lyons is joining us. You have been featured in so many publications because you have not a golden retriever husband. You have a what you call blue healer husband, and
Yes.
he has been taking you on the cutest coffee dates. And people
Yes.
all over the internet have loved this. Like, you've gone
Yes.
viral several times for your blue healer dates. So walk us through what that is and why you think you have found success from this. Also, I want to know you have a book coming out called Crushed. Blue healer
Yes.
dates. Go.
Okay, one, Crushed is really the culmination of how I got to this point. It's really like a real life rom-com. A rom-com in real life is the book.
Yeah.
And so how did I get to this situation where I have a husband who is, insists literally like push me out of the way to insist on knocking on the door to pick me up for these Friday coffee dates. And the reason we do that is because um having dates at night are very hard for us. We have two kids that live in the house. We have one adult foster daughter who doesn't live with us anymore. But our son is autistic. It's really hard to be able to, number one, afford babysitting, and then also just be able to move that dynamic. And so he started taking me out on these Friday night or Friday morning coffee dates when the kids are in school. And he knocks on the door and he picks me up, and I get embarrassed and I laugh because it just is so funny. And there was one time where I said to him, I go, babe, I'm getting my period and I cannot, like, I can't go anywhere. I can't. And he went and got me coffee and brought it to the door. And it was one of the funniest videos. People loved it. And we're just honest and funny with each other, with each other. And he just makes me laugh so much. And I make him laugh. And I think the like the culmination of all of this is that we just enjoy each other. I genuinely enjoy who he is, and he genuinely enjoys who I am.
Okay, I'm gonna link a few of these Blue Healer dates on our website,
Okay.
929thebeat.com. I'm
I
also
should say
go
blue heeler like bluey. I don't blue heeler dogs. People keep like, oh, but blue heeler would like bite you. I'm like, okay, it's about the show Bluey, guys. It's not about an
Bluey!
actual blue heeler dog.
I just know there's a kid in a car listening to this right now with their mom and now is demanding to see Bluey. My nephew's like that, Bluey
It's
now.
the best
It's the
show
b
ever.
but
And
then
my husband really is Bandit. And I really am Chili. Like our family really is Bluey.
okay, guys, joining me is Kirsten Lyons. She is the writer of a book that's getting ready to come out called Crushed. I'm like one of 3 people who have read this book.
You really are.
I'm obsessed, and I recently was in this, like, situationship, and
I love that term.
yeah, well, to say the least, and then he, like, was weird in his communication, so I broke it off, and he never responded, and I called you because
Mhm.
you are just like this fountain of wisdom when it comes to relationships because you have quite literally been crushed by relationships, and ironically enough,
Many.
that's the name of your book, and I was like, "He didn't respond, like, what if he's dead?" And then your response, of course, was
He's not dead, he's ghosting you. And I think and I said it with all the gentleness I could, but I think it's really hard for something for us sometimes because when we are such compassionate, empathetic people, we don't believe that we treat people the way we want to be treated and how they deserve to be treated. So we assume that everybody would be doing that too. So like
yes,
of course he's dead in a ditch somewhere because he made all these promises because he said all these things. So of course he would never lie about it. He must be
never.
dead in a ditch,
Well,
right?
and I was thinking, like, I sent him this very polite text because I was like,
Yes.
communication is strange. And I expected to at least get a thumbs up or
No.
something in return. And
No.
so after that, I told you, I said I just blocked him because he
Yeah.
isn't even respectable enough to give me the good old
Yeah.
thumbs up.
And I think to be fair, I want to say this. I don't think most people really know how to communicate. That's something that Bradley and I, when we started dating and when we eventually got married, we realized that we had been in therapy previously separately. I had done Al-Anon, which is like group therapy for friends and families of alcoholics. We had put in a lot of work into ourselves and learning how to communicate, and we'd had failed relationships and stuff. So we came to our relationship in a very different spot. And I
Mhm.
remember we had friends that like gave us when we got engaged, they gave us this like mason jar and had all these like sweet questions we'd ask each other like through our engagement. And we're like looking at them as they're giving it. And we're like, guys, we talked about this on like literally the third night we hung out. Like we don't, and it was the idea of like, I think so many people have a hard time knowing how to communicate. And
Mhm.
so they just don't.
And it's so
Whether
scary to do it. It's scary to like put
oh,
yourself out there and be
yes,
vulnerable.
but ultimately, like, that's what we have to do because I remember one time I said to a guy, I go, "Look, do you like me? Tell me. Like,
Mm.
this is ridiculous. Do you have feelings for me? I can't figure out if I have feelings for you. Just tell me." And he was like, I tried, but I don't." And I was like, "Great. I don't have feelings for you anymore. This is great. I was trying to figure it out. Awesome." And he like was like, "Wait, what?" And I was like, "No, this is how we do it.
Mhm.
Let's have a conversation. Let's not beat around the bush. Let's not pretend like let's just have a conversation." And that is what Bradley and I did when we were first dating. I was like, "Is there anything you want to talk to me about?" Anything at all. I
Which is
gave him
great.
but I was, like, opening the door. I was like, "Would you like to?" Because 'cause we'd been hanging out for, like, 3 weeks straight, but I had just gotten out of something, he had just gotten out of something, so we were being very, like it was just and I talk about it in the book. The book is a real life rom-com, and I really hope that people have the freedom to ask the question, and unfortunately, sometimes we get the answer we don't want, right? But,
Mhm.
like, ultimately, I'm so proud of you for, like, communicating, and I feel
But
bad honestly, I feel bad for him
I feel
because
bad for
he
him
doesn't
too
know how
because
to
now
communicate.
he's blocked
And
on
you're
my phone.
amazing.
Girl, thank you. No, but what was so crazy to me is he would say all these things and I, was cautious. But
Right.
then you can almost feel it when it changes. You can feel
Yeah.
it. And I just
Oh,
straight up had asked him, I
totally.
was like, "Hey, are you not feeling this?" And he was like, "No, it's not that." And it got to a point where I was like, "Okay, like you're footloose and fancy free. I got other things to do other than figure out what you got going on in your brain that you don't want to communicate." So it is you were so beneficial in that and I feel like the
Hmm.
book will be so beneficial for people to read who maybe are going through a similar situation. The book by the way is called Crushed, The Boys That Never Liked Me Back, but boys is crossed out and it says life. I'm going to get this linked on our website at 929thebeat.com. Ba-dum, ba Okay. Did you like that little intro? All right.
I
I'm glad
did,
you
I
did,
did. That was
listeners.
really, really musically
Sometimes
gifted.
I open my show and it'll just be me humming or something. Kirsten
Hmm.
Lyons is joining us. She's the author of the book Crushed, The Boys That Never Liked Me Back. Boys is crossed out and it says life. This book was so monumental for me.
Hmm.
It is you on pre-order. I've got a link
Yes, but
ninety-two 9 thebeat.com.
you got to read a very early
I
copy of it.
loved it. I couldn't put it down once I got to going. And normally it takes me like months to read a book. I want to talk about something that the book kind of highlights. It goes over when you're looking around and you see that everybody else is getting their dreams come
Yes.
true and your dreams are just stagnant, mosquito ridden water. You know what I mean? Where it's just like, it's not going anywhere.
Yes.
It's hard to see everybody else getting it. And you're just like, well, I guess I'll just sit here and park.
Okay, first of all, I think my hope is the first thing that Crush the book can do is so other people just don't feel alone.
Yeah.
Because the comparison is the thief of joy is absolutely such a quote that is so important for us to remind ourselves of. But when you're constantly looking at people's highlight reel and your backstage reel, right? If you're looking at everybody's Instagram, everybody's TikTok, everybody's Substack, whatever. And it just feels like, they're getting a promotion here and they're getting into their dream school there and they're getting engaged and all these things. It can just feel like, oh my gosh, like what is wrong with my life? And
Mhm.
I think one of two things have to happen. One, we have to acknowledge the truth is that we're not alone. We're not the only one, but we have to go actively like engage with people that are actually living real life. This is not an Instagram book. This is a book that is funny and raw and honest and vulnerable and silly and all the things. And I think the other thing that we have to do is we have to remind ourselves that like we all are on our own path and the things that we wanted when we were younger may actually not be not only the best thing for us, but we actually may not want them anymore, but we're holding on to wounds of childhood. For me,
Oh
I
my,
was.
okay. I feel called to the floor right now.
Because I think it's one of those things where it's like I held on to things for so long. For me, acting, right? I was a TV
Mhm.
actor and I held on to things and I still love performing and love acting, but ultimately it wasn't fulfilling for me.
Mhm.
I was just seeking validation in ways that LA and Hollywood was never going to heal the wounds that I needed to heal. And I needed to go, for me, I needed to actively figure out why I was making the decisions I was making and also allowing the people in my life that were consciously hurting me. Obviously, this starts out with a broken engagement, but it's not just about the engagement. It's about, having dreams. It's about being a bullied kid. It's about realizing what real healthy love looks like, being a parent. There's so many different being a parent of a child that has a disability. There's so many different facets of this book that I hope people will understand like not only are you not the only one that's getting crushed, but like there's so many surprises waiting for you and it is going to be okay, but I'm going to sit with you until it is okay because it might take a really long time and that's okay. And to learn how to grieve and hope in the midst of grieving.
Does anybody feel like they're looking at their peers and they're thinking to themselves, "Oh, I am way behind in life."
Mhm.
I gotta tell you, Kirsten Lyons is here with us. She's the author of a book called Crushed: The Boys That Never Liked Me Back. Boys is crossed out and replaced with life. You're also the podcast host of the podcast of the same name, Crushed. I have to tell you, I look at so many of my peers and they are
Mm,
in these really high powered positions, or they're
right,
in these happy marriages, and
right.
I look inward and I go, "Oh gosh, like instead of building my career in my 20s, I got married really young," which I still
Mm,
contend should be a federal crime. Like you should not be able to get married at 22. And I feel like I'm really far behind, and I feel like
mm.
your book Crushed touches on this a little bit.
Mm. I think a couple things. One, we have to own the fact that we feel that way. I
Mhm.
think sometimes toxic positivity like pushes it out and they're like, they really try to like everybody is on their own path, which is true, but until we honor and grieve what we thought was going to be and it didn't happen, we can't get to the next part, which the truth is that we all are on our own path. And there's a quote that I like live by. It's by St. Catherine of Siena, and it's be who God meant you to be, and you will set the world on fire. And I think for so long, I mean, even as a child, I looked at Jodie Sweetin's life on Full
Mm.
House, and I wrote her letters. And I talk about it in the book. Like that was my dream to be a cousin on Full House. I wrote them and I told them, like, I'll dye my hair blonde. I told them the whole like spiel because I thought if I could be famous, I wouldn't have the problems that I have right now. I
Mhm.
and I think what drove me were this idea that like finally I could feel safe if I was famous. So then
Mm.
when I didn't get famous and I had friends that got famous, it just felt so depleting and despairing.
Would you say
And that wasn't the
crushing?
only I would say crushing. Also, having your wedding called off at 28 and, that was obviously, I mean, 2 months shy of the wedding. I'm tying the bows on our wedding invitations as he came in to tell me he didn't love me. There's so many different things that happen in my life, that I've always been a late bloomer. And this book is filled with pivots, and this book is filled with broken dreams and new dreams and grieving the dreams that didn't happen. And I think for us to get to a place where we stop comparing ourselves and we stop the shoulds. Like, I should be here, I should be there. We first have to grieve and we first have to get crushed. And if we don't allow ourselves to get crushed, we're never going to move on to the good surprises, right? If we're
Mhm.
clinging so tight, then we can't actually have our hands open to receive. But we can't do any of that until we grieve, until we get crushed. And that is really what this book is about, is allowing ourselves these moments to just sit in the hard. Um, and then we can move on to the good, but we've got to sit in the hard.
Kirsten Lyons is joining us. You and I were chatting about safety inside of relationships, and it made me
Mm,
reflect back to my marriage, where I felt that any vulnerability that I would reveal to my then husband — we've been divorced 3 years now, I know —
mhm,
I felt like instead of him seeing that as an opportunity to lift me up and be supportive, and obviously
mm,
vice versa, he used it as like ammunition and a weapon to shoot me with later. And you were telling me something that I've not experienced, this intense vulnerability and
right,
ability to be
right.
like so safe with your partner that you have now, your husband Bradley. Walk us through this. You're also the author of a book called Crushed, which is an incredible read. You don't feel like you're going to say something wrong. You don't feel like you're walking on eggshells. You feel completely seen in your marriage. Walk me through
Completely.
what's that like. Yeah.
Okay, first of all, it's the best thing I've ever experienced. And I don't want to I understand the privilege and the luck that came with this, right?
Mm.
Like, yes, Bradley and I both were in therapy separately before we ever got together. But like, to be fair, we went out 3 years before we actually started dating, and I ghosted him for being too nice.
Uh-oh.
Like, I thought he was too nice. I just was like, where's the chase and nice? Like, real love is when the jerk changes for you. Like,
Right.
that's what Grease told me. That's what every rom-com told me. And this book really is a rom-com in real life. It really is like you get to see the heartbreak, how I got there, and watching me, because it's not just about falling in love. I just lost my headphone. It's not just about falling in love with Bradley. It's really about falling in love with myself. And I think that's the part of being in a safe relationship, is that I learned how to be able to be okay and being vulnerable with myself because I had
Mhm.
to tell myself the truth before I could ever tell anybody else the truth. And I'll get emotional. It is really scary to tell ourselves the truth, but we can't get there with someone else until we are able to do it within ourselves. That doesn't mean to get into a relationship to be fully whole. I do believe a whole relationship is two wholes becoming one. That sounds so weird. Two whole people becoming one whole person. It's not two
Mhm.
halves. It's not you complete me. It's nothing like that. But ultimately, like, we have to be able to be vulnerable and honest with ourselves before we can ever be vulnerable and honest with someone else. And also knowing that that person is safe is, it's almost like testing the waters, you know? It's like, what do they do with this amount of information? And then can I trust them with the next amount of information? You know, it's kind of like as a kid with money. It's like, if I can be trusted with $1, then maybe I can be trusted with $5. Then maybe, you know what I'm saying? And I think
Mhm.
that's really what a healthy relationship is being able to trust, being seen, known, and loved.
And you
And
really
laughing.
detail
We
and
laugh
laughing.
so much.
You guys are
We
so
laugh so
funny,
much.
especially online. But, your book, Crushed, you say is a memoir-ish, but it really
Mhm,
details these pivotal moments in your life that led you to where
mhm.
you are today, and it feels a little bit like I don't wanna say a blueprint, but it feels kinda like a blueprint, like, "Hey, I did
Mm.
it, you can too." It sucks while you're in
I
it, you'll get through it.
Yes, and I do wanna say this. I talk about going to Al-Anon, which is a support group of friends or family of alcoholics, and I really want it to feel like you're almost in like a meeting and you're
Mm,
hearing somebody share their story. It is a blueprint in the sense of like, this is how I did it, but it's not a blueprint in the sense of like, and do these 10 things and then your life will be great. It's more about, look, here I made a mistake, there I tried this worked for me, take what you can out of this book and throw away the rest. Like, you don't, it's, my life isn't a step by step thing. It's more about like, you're going to be okay. I promise you're going to be okay. But I also promise that I will be right there until you are, because it's going to take time and it's going to be hard and it sucks. And I wish there would have been someone to tell me all of these things, but I'm glad that I get the like the gift of telling you guys.
okay, the book is called Kirsten Lyons is joining us. She is the author of a book that I'm pretty sure, if I was a betting gal, is going to be at the top of a New York's l- Times bestseller list. The book is called Crushed: The Boys That Never Liked Me Back. Boys is crossed out and it says life. The cover, by the way, is MASH. Do you guys remember playing MASH? Thank you for being here
Yeah,
today.
I'm so excited.
I want to talk about something that your book did for me because I did you did ask me to read it beforehand and I loved it. But I think it does a good job of reminding people that no matter what crap situation they're in, they're not alone.
Mhm.
Because I feel like so often we think
Yes.
I'm the only one going through this. And the reality is no, you're not alone.
Yeah, and I think also I knew, okay, so the book starts with a broken engagement, right? Like, I was tying
Mm,
the bows on our wedding invitations. He walked in, told me he didn't love me. He wasn't sure he ever loved me. 45 minutes, found out he cheated. I did not know one person who had their wedding called off.
mhm.
Later on in life, I had a lot of people reach out to me and be like, "Will you talk to my friend? Will you talk to my niece? Will you talk to my cousin?" They just had their wedding called off, but I had nobody. So I really felt fully alone in that process. And that to me, in some ways, was even worse than the heartbreak because it was like, not only am I brokenhearted because every dream that I had dreamed up until this point with this guy is now crushed, is
Mhm.
gone, but also I'm embarrassed. This is really embarrassing and it's, I feel like a failure. I am. And then it was like, I'm a failure. I'm a failure. And childhood wounds came in and feeling like a loser for so long came in. And ultimately, for me, when I sat in a Al-Anon room, which is friends and family of alcoholics, I sat in that room and I listened to other people share their stories. Their stories weren't my stories.
Mm.
The details were different, but the crux of everything was the same. And it was all of us feeling like we weren't good enough and all of us feeling like we had to do something to make us feel enough and that we mattered. And I sat in that room and I, for the first time, was like, I'm not alone.
Mm.
So many people struggle with their validity. So many people struggle with feeling embarrassed and getting crushed and praying prayers and then not coming true and having dreams. And like, the gift of knowing you're not alone to me is the first step to healing because it gives us the safety and the security to finally grieve because when we are seen and our like pain is seen, it is it is scary, but when we are able to be witnessed, that is when we can finally start to move on. And I think that I hope that's what Crushed gave you, and I hope it's what gives everybody who reads it, is the idea that, like, not only are you not alone, but I'm going to sit with you in those moments in real time, so you know that you can always flip to a page and be like, I'm not alone, I'm not alone, Kirsten was here.
Yeah.
And also there's so much laughter and silliness and hope in it too. It's
The
not
book
just
is like
like,
a fun it's not like, "Wah, wah." The book is like a fun read. It's like I'm going through this, like, devastating moment with you, but we're also, like, laughing along the way, which I know seems kind of strange,
yeah,
but
my
it's
hope is that
brilliantly
you're
written because
crying
of
and
that.
then I punch you in the gut with something to make you laugh at the
You
same
did
point.
that flawlessly. I
Oh,
loved the book. Again, the book is called Crushed. Details on our website, 929thebeat.com.